I don't know.
Dude, that's bizarre.
He's
I've never
from,
met,
like-
yeah.
As far as the minute, because basically Hillary, what you
Yeah,
do
he's
is
with this,
click minutes. and then it
Palestinian
pulls in the
like,
agenda,
that
you start
was meeting with,
meeting,
and,
and
you know,
and
there
then
were two
like
people, I'm
a
like,
part of it
what's
where, like on the back, we have these.
Wow, that's crazy.
like,
That
And it
is
definitely
crazy.
wasn't, it was ARISH, no H on the front, because HARISH is a
It was
common.
exactly like it.
Man, that's messed up. Thought I changed
Because
my
I even
cat.
said I even said on St. Patrick's Day, you say, kiss me, I'm a rich.
Yeah. That's my trademark. But you know,
leave that between you.
I think it's like an uncommon name, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
when you have an uncommon name, you're like, proud of that. Nobody else should have something, but-
I'm sure there might be somebody named Station now, but I worked as a cashier for the PS. Families like their family name, they'd be like, oh, what's your name? So having a baby, and let me write this down.
Really?
Yeah, it was so awkward being a cashier at the PS.
One of my best friends.
So I assume there might be an addiction.
Oh, sorry, I keep saying Jason, Jason, sorry.
One of my
yeah.
best friends is
Zoom
Arliss.
has to be AI.
What is it, sorry?
Arliss.
Oh, okay.
And he went to Ohio State U for law school. And anyway, there was a professor there. He was African American. He's like,
And I even used it.
are you
here.
from
The problem is
Kentucky?
that
Like,
right
yeah,
now, we
I'm
have
originally from Kentucky.
like 3 people
You
on
know, my
stage.
family's got a lot of art.
We have the owl.
And so Arliss
Whole
did some
bunch of people in
research.
this
There's
room.
like a group of
We have
African
art.
Arlisses in this little town in Kentucky, and then right next to
And
it,
so
are
Zoom
these
will record.
Kentuckyans named Arliss. And he's like,
Oh, that's super interesting.
yeah, it's
Wow.
absolutely
Jumbled
crazy.
conversation.
I like that name, Arliss. It's a-
ARLUS.
Oh, LUS, interesting. I thought it was
Yeah.
LISS. Oh, that's
Well, you
interesting.
know what, there is, that was that TV show with the dollar signs, is the S, like a HBO.
Oh, that's interesting, because it sounds so familiar.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
Interesting.
ARLISS with the dollar sign.
Yeah.
Two S. So,
Yeah, I don't remember either. Yeah.
anyway, we were just commiserating that now.
I know. Do you think I mean, do you think he'll actually get like approved or confirmed in that slate? Or?
There's no process.
Well, I thought the slate of cabinet, right? Like, I don't know if
I
they'll,
think they're gonna go direct appointments. I think the Senate's abdicated,
interesting.
or at least
Yeah.
that's what he asked for.
Or, yeah, TV, right.
So maybe with the, maybe Finn is an institutionalist.
Probably. He tweeted that he's gonna look forward to implementing some agenda. Like, he should be in jail.
They should all be.
Like,
Is this being recorded by the way? 'Cause Am I the only one who's paranoid? Right?
They say that.
Yeah.
The Lord can go up.
you're in tech, so you got a reason to be paranoid. I just am dumb and happy about it.
I don't know. Got a scary few years or maybe many years coming up. Let's see,
And the printer on.
man.
You were in the New York Times?
No, the Alexandria sign.
Oh.
Almost as good. Depends, I guess, on your editorial perspective.
What were you in for? Oh, what were you?
It's like you're leaning against the pillar. You're standing on
Oh,
it. You're
okay.
too
Well,
probably.
if you-
I didn't. Well, I felt.
Because they did have their photographer out there, actually, she took a bunch of pictures that are full place, but. Did you use any of the ones that you were able to connect in the full system?
Yeah, like the media. There we go. Oh, that was that. This is the next.
Matt, was that with the Human Rights Commission
so,
or at that meeting?
Just executive board. In fact, we had it Monday night, and the offices were closed, and so we actually, it was live, so we met outside.
Oh, man.
We had
At least it was nice, though.
Yeah,
It was good,
exactly.
yeah.
I mean, it was public.
So you can,
Sorry.
you can access it through the
What did you say?
website.
There was a but there was no security.
Lots of advice from us.
You know.
So you can use the iPad. Because we want everybody to have it.
This wasn't.
Being in the bucket.
Yes, yes.
It's time to
But
adopt.
you can, right, but you can, I'm gonna explain this later. You can use your own computer.
I would have a hard time with the wire.
Yeah, you know.
Because everything's.
Hey, I'm not gonna be. able to You have a, you could watch out.
All right, I guess I can join. I think I downloaded it, so let me make sure
I mean, look, I think they just need somebody, right? So it's weird, but I'm worried that I did sign up for stuff about it being.
Yeah. This one will be really short. Yeah.
Thanks.
I know she's on her way, but. Yeah.
Hey, man, how you doing?
What about Jeff?
But.
He's coming.
Okay.
I didn't get a board pack. Oh, the
Oh,
agenda. I didn't get those.
oh,
They
oh.
ran out of them, and so.
Do you, I mean, I've got it online.
No, it's fine. I downloaded it, so but I didn't have it committed to memory. Because I was still-
Never long.
Just so we can. What are they doing?
I tried to get him to take the bus with me.
That's like right behind it.
Yes.
It's his son's day. This guy's a little more complicated today.
All right, folks, let's go ahead and get started. We have a quorum. So I'll call to order the November meeting of the Alexandria Transit Company Board of Directors. Thank you all for being here. I know Kirsten told me that she is on transit and so is on her way, and I hear Jesse is on his way as well. I see Art online. And Art, you had, we mentioned last month that you had a birth in your family, and so I know we'll take the attendance, but do you want to share your child's name and how everyone's doing?
Yeah, thank you. So on October 5th, had a son born, also named Arthur. I'm the third, so he's the fourth. But he's him and mom are doing great. And just put the best brains on it. The internet's options for a transit-oriented onesie. I really had hoped to bring him up here with a bus onesie on, just but couldn't find something. So I'll leave it to you find folks to find one, but I could not find one that I liked.
We have some of our staff recently had children. Were you any luck finding a transit onesie? Oh, Steph, you talked to Stephanie, so.
All right, we'll have to connect afterwards.
Oh, the Dash swag, right? We have a Dash one that we sell, so. We're
So
gonna,
there we go.
yeah. All right, so we've got a new customer, so this was a worthwhile, but congratulations, Art, to you and your family.
Thank you.
That's great news. So let's go ahead and ask our secretary to call the roll.
Chair Kaplan.
Here.
Vice Chair Kleist. Arish Gudger.
Here.
Matt Harris.
Present.
Praveen Kathpo.
Here.
Jesse O'Connell. Hillary Orr.
Here.
Kristen Phelps. Kendall Taylor.
Here.
Ajayesha Thomas.
Present.
Arthur Wicks.
Here.
Chair Kaplan, you've got a quorum. Those absent are Vice Chair Kleist, Jesse O'Connell, and Kristen Phelps.
And so Steve is, I think, flying back on work travel. I think has the link, and so if he's able to join us, and I think when he's changing flights, he may log on to onto the Zoom a little later. All right, let's move into public comment. So we start every board meeting with an opportunity for our public to engage with us, and so we have a public comment statement that I'll go ahead and read. We're about to convene into the public comment period of our meeting. All dashboard meetings include a public comment period at the beginning of the meeting, as we believe it is crucial for us to hear from our riders and community members. The board is here to listen. However, please keep in mind that the public comment period is not designed to be a discussion. Accordingly, please do not expect the board to respond to your concerns or questions tonight. We take any concerns and questions seriously and need sufficient time to process and research any issues if need be. Board members will respond to your questions and concerns at a future meeting or have the proper staff member get back to you at the appropriate time. Please note that personnel matters are not a part of the public comment period. However, please know that we take any personnel questions seriously. You are asked to contact the Dash administration with any such concerns. We ask that all speakers and members of the audience maintain civility and respect for any divergent views that others possess. Further, we ask that speakers please address their comments to the board directly rather than the audience. The board will take pre-registered speakers first, and then I will invite others who wish to speak who may not have pre-registered. For future meetings, you may pre-register on the website dashbus.com on the Board of Directors page. I will now call the first speaker. Each individual speaker is allotted 3 minutes for your comments. If you're speaking on behalf of a neighborhood civic association or unit owners association, please identify yourself accordingly. You may be recognized for up to 5 minutes. I'll ask our secretary, do we have any speakers who pre-registered?
We've got Lois Heavy.
Would she be in the room or on the?
She would be on Zoom.
Okay. Let's, okay, we don't see her yet.
The next one's Alan Dinsmore.
Don't see him on Zoom either.
Okay, so that's our speaker list. Let me ask, is there anyone in the room who did not pre-register wishes to speak? And then we will ask if there's anyone on the Zoom who did not pre-register, you may raise your hand. We'll pause to see if you wish to be recognized.
Only being a city staff member and a Dash staff member, so we must not be that interesting tonight.
Take that as a good thing. All right, so we'll go ahead and close public comment. We will now move on to the chairs. We'll move on to the chair's report. So I will recognize in a moment my colleagues who made up the general counsel search committee, because we have some updates, as you may have noticed from your board packet, as you've got a resume of a law firm that we are strongly considering. But I will just mention the second item that's there, the board policy revisions that I mentioned last month. We are still working with counsel, particularly on the virtual meeting policy. And so there's just in terms of how we may be different from kind of what the city has done because of the sort of our uniqueness as a nonprofit corporation. So I anticipate we'll bring that back in December, but we just need to work through Lonnie to resolve that. I will also just make one other announcement, which is that I have been attending and been so interested in some of the City Hall Market Square redesign, as I'm sure those who work in the City Hall are also very interested in. And I have asked, so I spoke with Jeremy McPike at a pop-up, and then I went to one of the virtual meetings where they actually unveiled the early design concepts for the square. But I asked especially about the bus stops that are there, you know, because there's 2, North Fairfax and North Royal Street, which are heavily used, and North Fairfax is where the King Street Trolley actually begins. And so what I was told at both those meetings is that TNS and Dash are engaged in discussions about sort of improvements and kind of orientation of the street and those stops. And I just wanted to confirm that that understanding is correct. I'm seeing nods. So I think there's some exciting things that could happen there, especially with some of the design concepts that are sort of extending the plaza into the market square, sort of into the sidewalk. And so definitely look forward to you know, hearing more about kind of the perspectives that TNS and Dash are bringing forward as ways we can make those stops you know, more comfortable and accommodate, you know, kind of growing numbers of people. But really interesting and project. So in terms of the general counsel, so Arish and Matt and I interviewed 2 candidates this past Friday. We had 4 applicants for the position. We have decided to move forward with one of them, which is Turner, Holden and Turner. They are a law firm that is based out of Loudoun County. What really attracted us to them is that Mary Gail Holden, who's the sort of senior partner in that law firm, has been the counsel to a transit company that's kind of serves the Piedmont region of Virginia, a private nonprofit transit company, for about 40 years. So we get a lot of great skills from them, and they certainly know both state and municipal government. They don't know Alexandria as well, but they certainly know kind of in Virginia a lot of the laws that would affect us and impact us. And so I was very impressed. They also have employment law experience as well, because all the employees of that transit nonprofit are actually, unlike us, they actually are managed by that main corporation. Their board actually is the employer. So they have a lot of great skills to bring. So I'll defer to my 2 colleagues, or anything you want to add about the process and this law firm that we're negotiating.
Not in particular, I guess just that they seem like a good fit for us, and that they're kind of flexible. You know, it's a mother son, I think, practice, right? Family run practice, but they've got a few associates. They also partner with, you know, an outside firm that can give more resources, and I think all of it's cost effective. So that's kind of one of the key components where I think we'll get, you know, service we need, but at a reasonable cost.
So we Josh, correct me, in terms of the process, we need to have a motion for the board to engage in negotiations, or at this point, or do we basically come back with the letter of engagement?
I think you could just consent to it in the sense that you ask the questions of the committee that you all might have, those who weren't serving. If there's anything you want us to follow up on, the board ultimately approves the agreement or any kind of contract like that. But there's nothing that that stipulates that you have to take an action in order for us to engage in that process.
And I will add that Mary Gail Holden, the senior partner, she was candid with us that she will be kind of wrapping up her involvement in law practice in, I guess, a year or two. And so Brian Turner, whose resume you also have, the other partner, is I think has several years experience practicing law, but has really been working under her. So I think the idea would be that a lot of kind of the early needs that we need in sort of setting some of the precedents would, I don't know if you
No,
had
no,
that correct.
no.
Okay, you looked like maybe you were thinking. Would give us a lot of what we needed kind of in the get-go, and then we would kind of transition to him, also with the understanding that we have the right to, change firms at any time if we feel that we're not getting what we need from them. But we certainly, they made a very compelling case.
One thing, their billing rates, when she leaves and he takes over, we should make sure that we're paying for his rates, not her rates continuing on. So that should be in the retainer agreement or whatever, the client engagement agreement. And then the second thing is, Josh, you're obviously okay with us retaining them since you'll be working mostly with them?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and I would share with the rest of the group, I think, as I mentioned to you all, I've had some interactions and experience with Mary Gail because she also has assisted with the state association that I'm a part of. So she's had that a little bit of experience in that arena as well with the Community Transportation Association. So I do think really gets the environment that we operate in, and probably has a lot of resources already developed that we could borrow from.
I have a couple questions. One is, how do their rates compare, like, to what you expect? There's
It
gonna be a
it
budget.
was much less than the other candidates by far. What were they talking about? 325 maybe an hour for her, but it also depends how we determine what the retainer agreement will be like. Is it a set a number of hours per month? Are we gonna do it ad hoc? So it's still to be determined. It's less than Lonnie's current rate,
Okay,
if that is any indication.
Yeah. got it. And what was the transit system that they've been working with?
It's Virginia Regional Transit.
Okay,
They operate a lot of smaller systems. They actually have multiple locations. And they are involved in a lot of human service transportation as well. So they do like paratransit, small bus transportation. Their current CEO and I have worked together for a number of years and also served on the state association together.
Great.
So I was able to talk to him a little bit about his experience with her.
and does the second attorney, Brian, have direct experience with that client? Like on that engagement?
He didn't indicate either way. We don't think he has nearly the experience that she has, but he's still been practicing for probably a couple of decades. And she did assure us that she would remain involved in case that questions arise that he can't answer. The interesting thing is this kid or guy, shouldn't say kid, his dad used to be in the firm. And he gave up his bar membership because he retired and now he's a paralegal there, non-practicing. So the firm itself seems to be, very, very solid and very stable.
Okay.
It's a good question,
And then Brian himself, does he have a law degree? I see he describes himself as an
Interesting.
attorney, but
Yes.
it lists his high school someplace called.
Let me
Virginia
answer that.
Polytechnic
Let me
State
answer. So,
University.
so in Virginia, we are one of a few states that still have this residual. You can read on, you can study the laws under
Okay.
a mentor.
Yeah.
And you still have to take the bar. So
Okay.
in Virginia, and I've run into this and I'm always like, where'd you go to law school? Well, actually, I didn't go to law school. But it's in the
Yeah.
tradition of like, Thomas Jefferson and folks before there were law schools in the US. It's just a mentorship.
Okay, got it. And are the two of them related?
Didn't think Mary.
Yeah, I think I misspoke and I was gonna say that actually, I apologize. I think I was thinking about the fact that his father used to work at the firm and they were sitting together, so I'm like, that's his mom, but yeah, it's his father that was her partner and retired from the practice. So that's the only kind of relationship, but he's no longer with the practice. And as she said, just to circle back on a couple of points I think Matt made, one, she kind of made the point that while she plans to retire, she doesn't really anticipate full retirement, like there's probably in her mind some thought process to still being available at whatever rate to continue helping with the practice. And as far as costs go, they did signal a willingness to be flexible and offer things like fixed rates. I think if we have one-time matters, we could think about alternative kind of other fee arrangements, something like if there's a outcome-based fee or maybe a volume discount or TBD, but I think there's a few arrangements that they'd be open to.
Also, I don't think this was shared on the interview, but I did meet with all the candidates I met with individually to talk about what Dash is and all that stuff. They did indicate that Brian Turner is actually actively serving with her, supporting
Yes.
Virginia Regional Transit
That's right.
currently. So I don't know how many years he's been doing that, but there was a parallel running in the sense that she was effectively mentoring him to understand the industry, to take over her role in supporting their organization as well. So there seemed to be an indication that there was going to be some process where he would, when she left, whatever that is, in whatever capacity, that he would already be very familiar with that organization, and if we engage them, our organization as well.
Yeah, thanks for calling that out, Josh, because I think what's true for them or all their clients is going to be true for us too, where for some period of time, she's going to be servicing the work if we move forward with them, but it's all with an eye to somebody else is going to take this over. I need to make sure they're prepared and ready to service the business. So thanks for calling that out, Tim.
And then I'm also curious of the committee's thoughts on the trade-off between like council knows the industry, but not Alexandria, versus I'm sure you have candidates who know Alexandria really well, but not as much the industry.
That was a good question. Don't forget, we only interviewed one other person who is locally practicing.
Yeah.
And we asked about that. The thing that we raised was he's a land use planning attorney and he appears before city council many times.
Yeah.
He doesn't know the code vis-a-vis with respect to transit and our duties, but I was a little concerned, and maybe the rest were as well, about possible conflicts. If he's got a paying client who's going before city council and we're going before city council, there's a limited pot. So we did weigh that, and I think, just speaking on my own behalf, the pros of his knowledge were not that great. I mean, he wasn't a political machine like Lonnie,
Yeah.
who, Lonnie could do things probably with a telephone call.
Yeah.
So it wasn't advantageous, and it certainly didn't outweigh the specialty in transit that this other firm brought.
Yeah, I agree with what Matt said. I mean, I was less concerned about the conflicts themselves because I think a lot of the work is behind the scenes on contracts and sort of advising us. I think if you went and asked council members who our current council is, I don't think any of them would be able to answer that because they just don't interact with our council. But that other candidate did not have any real experience in transit, or experience with some things like, I mean, that candidate dealt a lot with the zoning code, but not so much with things like FOIA. And so, when looking at kind of what are things, because we see the bills, what's the kind of work that we give to Lonnie? I think this firm definitely had that, and a lot of that, Lonnie did know people and could pick up the phone and either, call the city attorney's office or call. But I think that this firm, the city attorney's office, going to make sure that they're coordinating with them to ensure that we get what we need when there are things that the city has to do. And I think that they are very comfortable with that because they're doing that in other jurisdictions. A lot of real estate law that particularly Turner has. So I think that they're probably very used to dealing with a lot of the local government officials on some of those kind of transaction stuff.
Thanks. And initially it seemed like there was some key personnel risk, but with Josh added, gives me a little more comfort. We might be able to sort of help foster that transition handoff through the way we manage them.
And Lonnie is, I think Matt told me he's actually obligated to do this, but to turn over all the records that he is currently holding. I mean, it was something he offered and I didn't, but, we'll have all that. And Lonnie, takes very good notes of things, and his files are quite complete. So I think that they'll be able to kind of get up to speed on any pending matters that he may be working on at the time that they. But I thank my colleagues. I learned a lot about just how you organize a law practice, how you kind of market and explain your messaging in a law practice from the interviews and from both of you. So I appreciate that as a non-lawyer if I've participated. So folks are comfortable with moving forward and engaging. Okay.
Can you identify who on the committee might be the lead as far as working through the agreement that you can engage
Happy to do it.
with her and with the firm to kind of work out whether there's a retainer or whatever the agreement is, that would be helpful for Beth and I, so we can make sure we facilitate and have something back to you all that's.
Would you allow for Matt and Arish to do it together?
I was gonna say the same thing.
I would,
Yeah.
I defer to those who know the lingo and what to expect. Great. All right, well, that's all I have for the chair's report. Move on to the TNS report.
Call items they want.
I don't have slides for you. You
Okay.
may handle it.
If anyone has any questions on any of the items, I'm happy to answer them. We have the Eisenhower Avenue City Council approval, the Better Bus Network, Metro Road Design Outreach, and the 2031 CMAQ grant application. The one thing I'll just note that on that one is that each year we apply for CMAQ funds, but for 6 years out. And so this year we actually put $3.5 million in for bus bulbs, because we know that with a lot of the projects we're doing, we want to be able to have the funds to add bus bulbs, or they're expensive. They often don't fit in kind of the quick build design. So we're starting to get this kind of list of areas where we want to install them. And so that's kind of why we put this project in here, almost as a program, as a part of our transit access and amenities CIP project, to kind of fall within that, so that we have some funds to be able to build some of those elements from our plans. And then one item that was not on here because it was last night, I'll just update you all on the Duke Street Transitway. Went to City Council last night. Didn't get approved, then got partially approved. So we have a plan for the Duke Street Transitway. We went back to council really to talk about the service roads and how those looked kind of on the eastern end of the corridor. We came to some agreements on what those roads are going to look like, and that basically enables us to move forward with the design of the transitway. So we have our RFP out for design so that we can start moving forward with that project, and hopefully within a couple of years in construction.
What did they defer, or did they disapprove, or did they defer the parts of the?
They disapproved it first, and then they came back and approved it, but changed the design of one of the service roads to have a partial one-way street.
Alright.
The 2-hour
Which
discussion.
one did they, that was not the quick recap I got today, so, but there's years I trust more. Which service road?
So from Longview, Cambridge, it will be one way. And then, that's it. That's the only change. Everything else would be two-way. The Moncur East Taylor Run area would stay two-way, and then between Longview and West Taylor Run, it would stay two-way. But it
I'll
enables
look at
us,
a map later, yes.
it enables us to move forward with the design of the project, which is the important piece, and get a lot of the intersection improvements we wanted in Cambridge Road. And the transitway is not impacted with this.
So it doesn't have to go back to, because they just changed it, but you.
Yes,
you guys
they
can-
approved the updated plan, so,
Okay.
we also had added in, I think I had shared these slides with you guys a long time ago. It had really, our recommendation hasn't changed since we went to them in May with this information. But there's a queue jump lane at Quaker Lane, which will help buses through that area.
Can I ask on the Better Bus Network? So I went through and was looking, there was a lot of concern about the Taney Avenue. So it looks like that was addressed by WMATA, and so the neighborhood is satisfied. And, just in looking at changes they made, it looks like we either kind of have status quo or some improvements, but a lot of the routes are just, they're just renumbering them, but the service is gonna look the same. Is there anything the city wanted that they didn't get out of the network?
I don't think so.
Or I can ask Dash and Martin. certainly
Yeah,
can answer those.
Mark's really been heavily involved. I mean, my team's been involved, but they're not here. He told me if there were questions, he'd be happy to speak to them.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fair.
I can just talk briefly. I plan to talk a little bit later, but I can just mention briefly now that I think we're very satisfied with how Lumana has coordinated with Dash throughout this process. I think the areas that we were concerned about, they have sufficiently addressed with some changes to what we saw previously in the spring. So
Okay.
I think it was basically Taney Avenue and then section of North Van Dorn that are now addressed by the new 825 peak route. So I think we're largely satisfied.
And the frequency of that 30 minutes is roughly equivalent to the 8W route that's there.
The 829 route. Oh, sorry.
Well, I was saying it's a 30-minute, it looks like it was every 30 minutes during rush hour, and I wasn't sure if that was equivalent to the service that's out there now.
We've maintained the same.
Okay.
service.
Okay, thanks. You can come back when you do that later to check for them. So I did add, and I sent you all an email that, given that, the South Pickett Street is going now to city council on appeal, we had done a letter, to traffic and parking board when it was up for approval in June, and basically just wanted to reiterate our support. And so, we basically just took the letter and it's now changed to be addressed to the mayor and city council. Was this sent out? Just the letter that I sent out, which was just now with the address change. But are there any questions about the letter or discussion? This is up Saturday, so I can sign the letter tonight if we get a motion to adopt.
So moved.
Moved by Master, second Jesse. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions?
Abstains.
So it was Kirsten and Hillary. Very good. All right, thank you. Now we move to other board members who may have service on commissions and groups, anything that would be for the benefit of the group.
Just one thing, the Human Rights Commission, and I know we're a little different and we may discuss it later. Next month's meeting is going to be one of our two, I think, allotted virtual meetings, and I'm wondering if that's something we would consider. Not that I don't like being around you all, but sometimes traffic is just too much to get here, so even one or two monthly meetings virtually, if acceptable or approved, I think would be beneficial.
Virtual meeting policy does allow for that, because that's Virginia code, and so that will be in there when we pass it to have that option. I've always, well, next month is, we're having holiday meals, I believe, so we definitely don't want to make that one virtual. But we also have had the occasion where we might have needed to have a meeting in between, especially if there's something that comes up, and so I've always tried to kind of keep those
Conserve
for
it, yeah.
that option, because I believe it's also based on a calendar year. So like we do it on January, which we could certainly, if there's like inclement weather or something, that would be an option just for everybody to be safe. But it's something we can certainly consider as we plan, and we can try the new agenda and also see how we're doing with timing, and then figure out this meeting we want to slot in virtually. I appreciate the suggestion. Arthur has his hand up. Art?
Yeah, on that subject, do we have our own internal electronic meeting policy that we need to update? The state law changed this year, and I think it's now up to the percentage change, but depending on the number of meetings you have in a year, it's not just capped at 2 anymore. It could be higher. But I would imagine any policy we have in place would supersede that. That's how a lot of the other, not that we're like boards and commissions in the city, but that's how a lot of the other boards and commissions are operating. That they have their own policy that they need to update to make room for the change in state law. Did we need to do anything like that to have access to more meetings?
Yeah, it's pending right now. It's with council. It's one of the 3 policies that I'm hoping to bring back in December. And you're right. Thank you for the clarification. It will be the 50% that's allowed under state law. I think it has to be every other meeting. So I think you have to have an in-person in between in order to do that. So you can't just like do 6 months of virtual, have the rest of them in person. I will mention the Commission on Aging will be at Dash tomorrow for a meeting and a briefing with Josh, and so I appreciate Dash staff hosting at headquarters. And there are a lot of new commissioners who I think will be very interested in what we're doing in Dash, and they're particularly interested in how we measure ridership of older adults in the absence of senior smart trip cards anymore, and getting data about that and how we can look at how they're using the system versus other demographics. So it should be a fun meeting. We will, let me get back to the,
David, just a point of order, I don't think we approved the minutes.
oh,
last meeting.
I'm sorry, because I opened the resume and then I got off the agenda, so I was going off the slide.
They're coming up.
We're
Yeah,
still on 2D, right?
You don't go to those until your next section. Because
Okay,
we reorganized your.
got it.
Reorganized
Thank
the
you.
flow. You're,
Thank
you
you.
usually would have done them by now, yes, but they're up
What's
next.
Matt's telling us it's time to move along. Does anyone else have any announcements?
I look
Let's
right in
go.
front of me.
The October meeting minutes were included in our packet. I just have one correction. I didn't get a chance to tell Beth in advance. Bradley on the, I think where Kirsten had talked about the King Bradley, I think we just spelled Bradley, it should be Bradlee. I think it was spelled like the name Bradley, so that was very minor. Are there any other corrections to the minutes as they were presented? Not, is there a motion to adopt them? So moved by, Praveen, is there a second?
Second.
Second, Harish, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? All right. Minutes passed. All right, review of financials. So they're unavailable. Do you have any oral update on that or just the?
I know Kendall's been working hard and she updated me that we're making progress.
No, we've closed July and August. It wasn't in time for this. October would have been closed until the end of November, so we're gonna try to get September done. So the next one, no matter what, you're gonna get something.
Thank you. We move into action items, and we're making good time. It's already only 6 o'clock. It says 6:35. So have any public comments?
Be ahead.
Talk about a no hitter.
So, Josh, I will turn that over to you to present the budget supplementals and then the budget restrictions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. The information regarding these two action items is included in the packet. They're fairly self-explanatory. I wanna give the attention that they deserve, while at the same time acknowledging that because of the way the budget process works, this is something that we do fairly early on, while the city is really working behind the scenes on this. The city has given us both the instruction for supplementals as well as for reductions. So the first item 4A are the supplementals. They are built out in accordance with the guidance that you gave in your letter to the city manager's office. I believe at the last meeting that we had been when we did it. So we have not changed anything there. There is a table, of course, included in regards to those improvements and equity scores and various other things that go along with those. The only other item that still sits here is a contractually required supplemental. This is the last year of our collective bargaining agreement. That was a component of the last collective bargaining agreement to get us over the finish line. It is historically not been prioritized by the board. It is simply submitted in accordance with that agreement, which would be a 1.5% additional wage increase on top of the 4% that is already awarded to the workforce. So with that, we'll welcome any questions, but as mentioned, nothing here is new. Nothing here is outside of what you've already discussed in previous meetings.
Well, I think, I mean, in terms of how we tackle the 32, the partial improvements, and I was, because we were waiting for Martin to be able to come back and then do the analysis. And so you came up with two proposals, partial, and I kind of think I understand how you got where you wanted to be. You wanted to have them both be the same, but could you speak just a little bit to, especially as, we may then be getting behind one or the other when the budget is announced. And so just to understand kind of, so for example, like on partial improvement B, Eisenhower Avenue not included in that, is the ridership higher, the landmark to Van Dorn segment. And so appreciate any context you can add.
Sure, and thank you for the question. Just briefly go over the three options here. As you mentioned, one is the full, which would bring the line 32 up to 30-minute service 7 days a week. Currently, it's only running once per hour during weekday middays, evenings, and weekends. So the full improvement would take care of that and bring it up to 30 minutes at all times. The two partial improvements, the first one is just improving weekdays, the entire route. So that would bring all the entire like throughout the 30 minutes all day, between middays and evenings. And then the third one is where we look at just the western half of the route, which includes the segment from Landmark to Van Dorn Metro, which generally is kind of more of the area that's defined by increased equity considerations. It does have higher ridership in that section. I think at this point we want to present a couple different options, just depending on which direction the board want to go. We've included partial option A as kind of a slightly higher ranked option. I think the thinking is that we want to provide the entire route with at least 30-minute service on weekdays. That would help out the Eisenhower Valley corridor, which is basically between Van Dorn and King Street, which doesn't have any other options for service, whereas the folks that are over in the segment on the west half do have other options within the walk shed. So that was an important consideration. I think also we feel like we've neglected the Eisenhower East area with all the development there. So we're trying to get our, get our service levels up a little bit there, at least for weekdays. So that was kind of, the pros and cons to both sides. That had tipped us a little bit in that direction. But that's kind of the background.
So, and that will be clear in the supplemental submission. I see it does say prioritize, but that we would prefer, if it's partial, we would prefer B over C. Is that gonna, we'll make that clear to the. Well, I guess, I mean, it's ultimately dollars, so I guess then it's kind of up to us to, he's sort of been allowing that either 460 is spent or not.
Right.
Then we can decide, okay, but it'd be helpful, hopefully, to have a little bit of context just of what you kind of explained as to why, why each one is there and submitted, what the benefits are from each of them. There wasn't sort of like I wasn't sure if we would then get kind of a lesser tier of say, okay, we could do Saturday on the whole route for this much smaller amount of money. Was that something that you had considered, or did you want to come in equal on both?
We did. We had, I think, 4 or 5 different scenarios. I think we would be a little hesitant to have the weekend headways better than with a weekday.
Because the demand is higher.
The demand is generally higher. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
We could scale this a little further though, if we have to.
Why are we presenting B and C? Like, why are there 2 options instead of just C?
Well, I think we wanted to present that to the board just to in case, and I know in the past, we've heard feedback from this body and also from our advisory committee that the west end of the route, the west half of the route, landmark to Van Dorn is a priority. So we want to recognize that desire, but also to show this other option that would not have any short trips. We like to avoid short trips when we can. So just to provide you guys with some option in case you want to consider that. Thanks.
I do appreciate the options because I think spending a lot of time on Eisenhower myself, especially on the weekends, ridership is, it's sort of a chicken and egg thing. I never take it because it's an hour wait. And I would, I just know I would, and some of my neighbors would take it more often to get, over to Eisenhower or Carlisle or, points eastward. So I think they're both really important improvements. So I appreciate the options.
Any questions on the supplementals? And so this is an action item.
This is an action item. A couple other things I would just add, and I wanted to point out here. One is that you can make edits to these as you would like. If you want us to change this at all, you're certainly welcome to do that based on the discussion. I also provided you these handouts, and sorry, Art, I can't hand these to you, but they are in Boardable. If you're logged in the Boardable, you can actually view these documents. So, but the team has worked very hard to put together some infographics on past investments that have been made in Dash, and this is sort of these are really, I think, really well done, and I give credit to the team for really working hard on putting them together. We welcome your feedback on these, but the reason I handed them out when I did is because the first page is sort of a broad overall view of Dash and sort of what it does for our community. But the other 3, if you look at the title closely, all stipulate what they were. So impact of line 30 service improvements, impact of line 33 service improvements, which were supplemental funded, and then the impact of the line 34 realignment. And so we broke them out by those individual investments. The ultimate goal being that these are the kinds of materials that we can give to the public and to our riders and to our council members and anyone else who is interested in understanding what is the return on investment in transit.
He wants
And
us to
what is
tape him to the
transit?
walls on the way out of here. Sorry. He said he wants us to tape him to the walls on our way
You're
out
welcome
of
to do
here.
whatever you would like. That has tape somewhere.
Frame them.
Like all the defense contractor add to the town.
But I welcome if, as you look at these, if there are things on here that do and don't make sense, or that you would like to see more or less of. We welcome that feedback and we'll continue to work on refining this.
I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
I love this and I'll think about whether there's anything that would be helpful to add on it. Cause it's just in terms of usefulness of this, like these being, JPEG'd or whatever, so that people who are on social media can blast them would be incredibly helpful for, building advocacy. Like I know PTAC did a lot of graphics like that that really made their budget asks compelling and understandable to broad to the public, and then shareable to build support. So I think that would be really helpful for in the lead up to the budget cycle.
And I know the team has already started posting some of these facts, so. we'll
Yeah.
continue.
Josh, what's the source for the equity impact figures
On which,
on all three of these? Because, I mean, where it says annual low income ridership trips plus under 23,000, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, so those figures are based on the customer survey that we did.
Okay.
Fall 2023.
Gotcha.
So we assumed that there was an X that would increase in ridership. And
It would automatically correspond. Okay, thanks.
Is there any way to quantify in terms of the car trips removed from city streets per year to extrapolate that to like traffic wait times or trip? Like, I know, we don't know what people in their cars are gonna do, but but like, to me, that's such a point that's hard. That people just don't really believe that for some reason, that like, you get more people in one vehicle, it reduces vehicles, which then reduces the time you spend in your car, right? In traffic, and so I don't know if that's quantifiable, but if there's any way to, I think that would be a point worth trying to include.
I think that is included. So a lot of this is based on NBTC transit webpage, which is an awesome resource. I'll plug it in, transit. Has a lot of great resources, including some specific for Alexandria. I think that's one of the factors of that.
'Cause, yeah, I mean, I think if there's something everybody in the city wants, especially for those of us who live off of certain roads, is less time sitting in traffic.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think everything on here is great, but I do think the two graphs that show the impact on ridership in this just clear visual way, I think are among the most important things here. And you may already be planning to share these directly with members of council as we head into the budget cycle, but I think there are not a lot of tangible ways that when they make these budget choices, you can literally see like they gave us money, they did a thing, and look what happened. And I think driving that home is going to be very important because I mean, these are fantastic.
that's definitely the plan, and a number of council members have reached out to me asking for this.
Great.
So, in the past, multiple times. Yeah.
Also, I think it's got average weekday boardings and weekend boardings, and I think that if like off-peak or rush hour boardings would be there too, because like if that's possible, because I think that is also sometimes a misunderstanding, like understanding that these are not just commuters on the
Right,
bus,
that's right.
like that I get on the bus at 5:30 a.m. and it's packed, or 10:30 p.m. and it's packed, and I think having some facts to back that up in this format would be helpful.
We do the popular annual financial report, and although I cannot devote all pages to it, to Dash, I do think probably this one, but I can work with you guys electronically to get that to work better. That'd be good. Yes. Track one times four.
So we can vote on the supplementals. I am gonna break the prioritized supplementals and the contractually obligated supplemental into two votes, so we'll take them one at a time. That's acceptable to the rest of the board. So can I have a motion on the prioritized supplementals for the service improvements?
So
Move Jesse, second. Matt, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions?
Abstain.
Abstain, three staff abstentions. On the contractually required supplemental, can I have a motion on that? This is the one, moved by
So moved.
Jesse.
Second.
Second, Kirsten. Any further discussion? I will just add, several of our board members are new, and I don't want to belabor this, but I will be abstaining on that motion as I did last year. It was just really a question of this was something that was agreed to in the collective bargaining negotiations that actually didn't come to the board. Basically, this that we would submit to the manager this for the 2 years. And what should have happened is the board should have approved, including that before it was agreed to in the contract. It was a very good contract and a very good end to the negotiations. And I thank the team for that. But just because from a process standpoint, I abstained last year on that and I will abstain again. We have taken steps to make sure that doesn't happen again. One, aligning new contracts with the start of the fiscal year, so that'll be included in the budget process. And two, I think there's an understanding that if anything comes out of that, it will come to the board. But for anyone watching, I just wanted to clarify that it's not my opposition to our staff being able to ask for an increase. It was simply about process. And as Josh mentioned, this is the last time this will come up in this agreement. With that, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions?
Dang.
2, 3, 4.
Sorry, I think,
Okay, so with 4 abstentions, everybody else voting in favor. All right, we'll move on to the reductions.
So as mentioned in the supplementals, there's a part of the budget process that also sends reduction targets. This was also included in the letter that you all viewed last month from the city manager. It was a letter written to schools, but the letter intended to apply to all parts of the city. So that includes us. So there is a 1% reduction target included as a part of that. We built the reductions basically exactly off of the priorities which the board weighed last year. The decisions the board made in this process in regards to how you want to go about doing this. We have in the past put forth administrative reductions. Administrative reductions only come up with a little bit less than $100,000 worth of money. And as mentioned in the past years, that reduction is basically to gut all training and professional development of staff. And so it was made pretty clear by the board that that was not aligned with our priorities. It also no longer aligns with our strategic plan. So that's why it didn't bring to you multiple options in this scenario. I simply brought forward the option that accomplishes the target number that's requested here. And that is a reduction in the weekday peak service of line 104 and line 102. And we would anticipate an annual boarding reduction over 20,000 and a reduction in force of 4 employees. If something like this were to happen, we would endeavor to accomplish that through attrition wherever possible in such a case. But that's essentially where this comes from and the basis of why we formed it the way that we did again this year, similar to last year.
And this is a halving of the service. So this is a 30-minute route that would be 60 minutes if the reductions was taken. So it would still be service, but it would be.
And that's just during peak.
Right. Because then 104 doesn't operate at all and the 102 is already 60 minutes.
These continue to be the lowest performing routes year over year. We've always stood together in understanding that reducing a low performing route actually makes the problem worse, but we also are acknowledging the importance of the budget situation and the expectation set forth. We want to make sure we bring forward something that is as minimally impactful as possible.
I think the community, certainly who were around last year, know that we did not, a 104 reduction was proposed. We advocated very strongly against that with council. We heard about the importance of that route from commuters as well as even surprisingly middle school students who use that to get to GW. And so I think anyone who's watching and concerned about this, we must send reductions up. And Josh has made the case as to why we simply can't continue to absorb these within the other components of the budget, which are such a small part of our budget, is really just the operation of the service because we're a lean service, but we will continue to advocate to hold on to all of our routes and the connectivity within the city, especially as these are not places that are served by other options. But it's something we have to do. We do it in public, which is a bit, we've also talked about as a bit unique, whereas city departments are sending up these lists, without public deliberation and then the city manager can decide, yes, I want to do this. No, I don't want to do it, but it's done in a very controlled environment. But we are doing this basically because we do the business in public. And so members of the public who are concerned, this is not something that is necessarily going to happen. And we do know that we have strong support within the city for transit. So with that, is there a motion on the reductions? Jim wants to send a much.
So moved.
Moved by Matt, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Harish, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? Art, abstain?
I think so, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay,
Back to the agenda.
yeah. The next.
Okay, yep,
Staff
you're up.
reports? Yep. So before I get in my general manager's report, I wanted to mention the boardable system. As I mentioned the last meeting, we were evaluating multiple options and systems, both from a features perspective and price perspective. We found one that aligns with our budget and has the features that we are looking for in a board management system. Couple of notes that I would say, it is our intention at the next board meeting to carve out a few minutes for a quick training from the boardable team. They will actually come on and do that, so that you all are familiar and comfortable. Beth has reached out to ask if you want a device issued to you. If you haven't already let her or I know, please make sure you let us know. We'll be providing iPads to board members to use for this purpose. Boardable has an app, but you can also use it as a website. So if you want to use the computer you already have and just log on to the website, you certainly are welcome to do that. All of the materials, all of the content, everything that happens within Boardable is kept in the cloud in that system. The system will not only handle all of our future meetings and all of our board materials for future meetings, it will become a reference point for all of the past meetings, all the documents that you all review and approve. We've already started loading out policies, documents. The document center will have everything right at your fingertips. So when you're in a meeting, if there's something that you want to talk about that you want to know, what did you do last year? What did you write? What did you say? You can pull it up. You'll have it right in front of you. You won't have to rely on us. Additionally, the materials, when published and updated, you'll automatically get push notifications letting you know there's new material. For example, the letter today that we had to bring in after the materials were published, you would automatically be able to see that. David can electronically sign the documents and so forth. Number of other features associated with the platform, but just a quick mention to make sure. And also, if you've received an email from Boardable giving you a welcome and asking you to log in, if you would please go ahead and do that, so that you're able to get into the system in time for the next meeting. If you have any trouble, let me know. You'll also be asked to RSVP to meetings, and that RSVP actually does come through on the Boardable system, and we can see whether we're close to meeting that quorum and be able to understand how the meeting is going to pan out based on attendees' RSVPs. So a lot of helpful tools. The intent is to really make your job easier, to make our job easier, and also to make us more collaborative and make sure that all of our materials and everything we're doing are residing in the same place and we're being effective use of your time.
Just one question. Will we continue to get just a printed copy of the agenda as we did in the past, or is that going away as well? It's just helpful to kind of then know kind of where we are in the meeting. And candidly, I haven't been in Boardable yet, so that may be something that's very easy to follow along with, but
Sure.
it has been helpful just to have that page.
I think what we'll go to is by request process. We're certainly trying to cut back on paper as well. But we would assess that once you guys see the system and are able to understand how the app works. I think it's designed to be pretty intuitive, so you can follow along and actually take notes to yourself and stuff during the meetings and add tasks and follow-up items as well within the system. So, but we're certainly happy to do that if that's needed. The next item, the first item here is just circle back from the last meeting. We spent some time. Intent is not to spend a lot of time talking about this evening, but rather just to give you some high-level updates of the hard work that the team has been doing, helping us to catch up with our maintenance backlog and to really fully restaff our maintenance department. I'm really proud of the work that the team has been doing. We've had both Yvonne and Stephanie here who are going to sort of just give you a summary of the things that they've been doing. Yvonne, I'm glad you made it. Yvonne just was rushing back from a conference which was involving transit recruitment, right? So I'll let you both speak to the board.
Great, good evening. We have worked a lot on those processes as well as how candidates can interact with Dash. So we've made it easier to apply. We've implemented texting with candidates. You may know that texts have a much faster open rate, and the ability to reply to texts from candidates is also a lot easier. We're doing that directly in our applicant tracking system. So emails have an open rate of 22%. It takes 90 minutes for a candidate to actually open something from us and read it and respond, versus a text has a 90% open rate. And of course, we all know that we can respond to text a lot faster. So that's been a big win. Other creative things we're doing to expand our pipeline and to make sure that we're reaching out to minority and disadvantaged communities. We're implementing a partnership with SkillBridge. You probably know that program. We also have a partnership with V3, which is Virginia Values Vets. That gives us access to lots of virtual job fairs that they run. I've done this in my past, and it can be very successful. We have a job fair planned on November 19th with Lutheran Social Services of National Capital Region. This is a partnership that will give us access to the refugee resettlement program that they sponsor. We're also meeting with community colleges in the area to make sure that we're targeting students who may not yet have employment experience, but they're certainly working on their education. So just a continued commitment by Dash to focus on education both in school as well as on the job. We also have a lot of new talent on our marketing team, so increasing our communications, enhancing our career page with testimonials. Heard a lot at the conference this week about just trying to attract new talent. One of the things that's happening in transit is the #1 reason of leavers is retirement. We obviously have an older workforce at Dash, and so really making sure that we have strategies in place to address that. We're also going to be marketing our sponsorship of certifications, again, to focus on the ability to continue your career. We're developing a recruiting business card, so hope to have those for you guys next time. Just work with us, serve our community, as well as connect with us on a variety of social channels. And when we've accelerated our employee referral program, instead of paying out starting at 6 months, we're paying out now starting at 3. And the truth is, again, what I heard a lot this week is that we're going to have to continue to be very creative in all efforts of recruiting to try to not only create Dash as a great place to work in the community, but also just attract the people to transit. It's a real challenge for all agencies.
All right, so while Yvonne and her team are working all that magic to get us some more staff, the question probably is, how do we keep up with the workload so we continue to maintain service while also making sure that we uphold our safety standards? That's going to be a big part of it. First thought you may have is related to overtime. What does that look like for us? That's usually an easy thing to go to first. We have lifted restrictions on overtime, but we're talking about 10 staff. And it's a voluntary basis, so that's only going to take us so far. The second big thing we've done, though, that I think has really helped us is to identify both work that can be done really quickly that can be outsourced for cost neutral. For example, that would be putting tires on rims that may take a tech an hour to do. We can have someone else do it at a cost neutral and save that time. The other thing we're identifying is work that may take 1 or 2 weeks for a technician to do, and outsourcing that work so they can spend their time. What we think is the sweet spot, buses that they can fix same day or in 2 days. So that's where our focus is for us, how we're prioritizing it. I did mention safety. I want to emphasize that it's important that we maintain our standards through this process. One of the first things we did was meet with the staff to set what the expectations are, that we're not going to cut corners. We're not going to, as important as it is to make service, that's not something that we're willing to sacrifice. So I can assure you that's an area that we're focused on. The last thing, though, that I do want to bring up that creates a challenge for Yvonne and I and our teams as we recruit is the CBA does have, strict regulations about seniority and what pay we can offer as we bring staff in. And I think the big thing you can think about is an A technician who may have 10 to 15 years of experience. We have to offer them entry level pay. Low seniority, which usually results in third shift. It's a challenge that we're gonna have to be very creative to figure out how we work through that. But it is a challenge that we're gonna have to work through. So we'd be happy to take any questions if you have any about improvement or how we're maintaining service.
Well, so we had, I knew several employees who were on leave, and so maybe some of them have come back where that's still the same number are out on leave, but then with there 4 vacancies that you had one last month, then are there still Well, I realize it takes time to recruiting pipeline, but I just wanted to ask, are we still at 4
We have
vacancies?
2 starting on Monday.
Okay,
and So
well,
that
that's
leaves
good.
us a net of 2.
Okay,
Yeah.
and are they both entry level
They are.
mechanics?
Yeah.
And the ones that were on leave are still on leave. So
Okay.
we still have the 10 active working technicians.
You have 10, you're trying to get to, you had 4 vacancies and you had, was it 4 others who were on leave?
It was 3 that were.
3 on,
leave, yeah.
okay.
And we've been,
So
you know,
17 is fully staffed.
on the current budget, yes, I think what we
We
talked
talked
about
about
previous
maybe
meeting,
even-
it should be more like 19 to 22 for our fleet size. We're obviously gonna be looking at trying to figure that out in the next couple of fiscal years, but 17 is fully staffed budgeted right now.
Well, that's great. Congratulations on getting a couple new people in the door. And then what's the training process for, how long before they're sort of then on the line and able to kind of function fully in what's expected of an aide?
Yeah, it depends on how much experience they bring, but because of our restrictions that Stephanie just mentioned, we're really focused on C mechanics. But they're all on probation for 90 days, during which there's evaluation in, both directions. But the ramp up time it varies just based on what they bring, and certainly if they bring certifications with them, that also helps.
Other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you both. We'll continue to keep it all updated. But again, I want to thank the team, everyone who's been working hard on this issue. Missing service is not something that we ever want to be doing. But we seem to have curtailed that to as minimal as possible and been able to have great progress in supporting our maintenance team. So big lifts there, but we're getting there. The next item is the WMATA Better Bus Network implementation. There were some materials included in your packet regarding that, and I think Martin's going to summarize that.
I'm sorry I stole your thunder.
No, not at all.
I was eager to ask the question because we've had a lot of discussion about that.
Right, and I think you hit the most important point, so I'll keep it relatively brief, try to keep us ahead of schedule. So yeah, I do want to take a moment. It's a pretty big deal. It's a big milestone. The WMATA board just approved this just this month. This is a multi-year effort across the entire region. They'll be implementing the first phase in June of this coming summer, so it's right around the corner. We're working closely with them on the implementation phase of that. And like I said, I think we're pretty happy with what has come out for Alexandria. You'll notice that our core network is largely intact with what we had from the ATV. The same goals and recommendations are largely intact for that core network. There are some peak changes from what we had previously anticipated, but I think they're all positive. There are better connections from Arlington to Alexandria, which is a big point of our system. You'll see the A70 and the A71 provide connections from places like Potomac Care to Boston, from King Street to Boston via Shirlington and Park Fairfax. So I did want to highlight those. And there is one route that's not shown on those materials called the A29. That's going to be a potential peak route that follows the West End Express routing, West End Transitway, that the WMATA is trying to apply through the Commuter Choice Program. So we'll look for that as well if they do get the funding for that. And I would be remiss, I mentioned some of the areas that we were concerned about, Taney Avenue, North Van Dorn Street. I neglected to mention some parts of Park Fairfax that are losing the 22A. There are some alternate services, the -36 routes go through there. And we've also got the A71, which goes near there, but not quite the same alignment. But I did want to mention that as well, since I know it affects some of our riders. And also on Glebe, the 23 A's and B's are no longer going to be on Glebe here between Park Fairfax and Alexandria. The 36 also covers that. And I guess just to wrap it up, I would note that all the route numbers are changing. It's going to take some time to adjust. We saw that with our new network. I think that was half the battle, was teaching folks the new route numbers. So we'll be getting used to that. I will note that although Dash is not planning to change our route numbers from what we had from New Dash Network, the numbering system that WMATA selected does allow for that in the future if we so choose to do the 830 or 832 or something like that. But we're not planning to do that. We're also not just planning to change our bus stop signs. WMATA will be installing new signs. I think there are 300 stops in the city that try to have new routes and have a little more information. Our stops will be the same as what they are today. So no plans to change those. That's all I got for that. Any remaining questions on the Better Bus Network?
So do you think when WMATA made this or proposed this, they took into account our existing routes as well?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
that was explicitly done.
Okay.
I mean, they kind of acknowledged that the ATV was kind of was precedent.
Okay, oh, good, it's precedent. Okay,
The King Street to Ballston, which you talked about, is a great connection to have now. And so it would be nice to have something westbound, you know, on the 31. Now granted, they'll be charging a fare, whereas we won't, but, I hope, you know, there can be some talk about when they're timing their route so that their route isn't coming like immediately after ours, and then you have a 15-minute wait, because if you're gonna get more service, it would be ideal if it could be spread out a little bit. Now, I realize they have other factors they have to consider in their service, but hopefully, will they coordinate on some of the scheduling with?
Yeah, we
with
usually
that?
try to do that in those quarters. Duke Street is the main one where we do.
Okay, yeah, that's,
But that's certainly gonna.
okay, because I was just thinking about if the service all comes right at the same time, it'd
Yeah.
be tricky, and, you know, they should also be aware that they may, you know, because students are probably gonna wanna ride whatever comes first if they're sitting at the high school waiting to go back, because of course our buses are so crowded, so, I mean, that may be something that they wanna consider on that route, and, you know, being able to help us with that, because I know we've had to put ghost buses there to help with some of that service, but having extra buses where some of the students are really just going as far as the metro or even getting off, you know, in the neighborhoods, to go and run before they get there would be helpful if they could carry some of that, especially if their buses aren't full, in the initial. But yeah, no, it looks really exciting, especially for Potomac Yard connections too. That's very important to have more service.
I'll just say I've worked in Boston for 17 years, lived here for 10, and the A70 route, like compared to the 10B for getting to Boston, looks great.
Yeah.
And I think between the A70 and A71 Boston routes, like it'll improve. I think it'll also improve like Dulles Airport connectivity. That's
true. Thank you.
Thank you. Like to, but yeah, so well, thank you. Little plug as mentioned, we kind of led the way. I think Martin, his team and all of Dash really did a great job with the ATV and the new Dash network. So there were a lot of great examples, I think, set for WMATA as they went into this process. Monthly ridership is presented as shown here on the screen as well as in your packet. Not much to say except we're continuing to kill it. Ridership is still through the roof and buses are full, so we're continuing to do everything we can to move as many people as we can. So. So the next item today is the departmental presentation. So just a quick reminder of sort of how this, since we didn't get to this last month and Edwards are home and said, I didn't have to feel it. Now you're back. But the goal here is to align with the aspects of our strategic plan to help you as a board understand some of the components of how we're doing things at Dash. So at each meeting, we intend to have two presentations. The first one is a staff presentation to talk about a process or something we're doing internally to help you understand a little bit more about a component of Dash and what that team does. So Edward's up first. He gets to talk about the budgeting process, even though that's already kicked off. We've kind of tried to time it ahead of that, but hopefully you'll be able to learn some things from his presentation. And then we'll have the strategic update, which this month Ray will be presenting. And you'll be able to hear about that as well. So the clicker should work for you, Edward, and I'll let you.
Yep, looks like
great. Great.
All right, thank you, Josh. So this is a presentation of kind of how the budget process works. As Josh mentioned, we are in that right now. Last month, the board did approve current services. Tonight, we went through supplementals and reductions. But this should be an overview of kind of the life cycle of that process, what goes into it, and how Dash develops current services. So each year, starting in the fall, we develop the current service budget, which is what is it going to cost next fiscal year to do what we're doing this fiscal year. So a number of things go into that. First, we start with departmental inputs, and that can't be any new additions. It's just, you know, what does each department have? Then any mandated wage increases, so for the CBA. We then, Dash has a number of mileage-based inputs. So these are all formulas based on kind of our service profile mileage. And so that's like fuel, maintenance cost, all those kind of variable costs, tires as well. So that'll go into current services. Then any existing vendor contract cost increase. So if we have vendors and we know that their costs are going up in the next fiscal year, we can account for that as well. So that's pretty much what goes into the current services process. One of the challenges with current services, obviously, is we're starting that in the fall for next fiscal year. So we're in FY 25 right now. We have actuals from FY 24. Obviously, we don't have anything for FY 25 yet. The year's just started. So we're using last year's financials to predict next year's financials. So that's always kind of a challenge that we have. Quick breakout of looking at what we put into the FY 26 budget and what the kind of breakout of our expenses in that budget. So first looking at it by function area. No surprise, our largest function area is operations, closely followed by maintenance. So admin makes up less than 18% of our overall budget as far as function areas. And then looking at personnel versus non-personnel, consistently, personnel has been just about 80% of our budget. Out of that non-personnel number, the 21%, the bulk of that is going to be fuel costs, maintenance, parts and repairs, and insurance. It was mentioned earlier, you know, kind of discretionary admin is really less than $100,000 of our budget. So less than 1% of our budget is discretionary items. So that's the expense side. Transitioning to the funding source side. So this is kind of a breakdown over the last several fiscal years of what funds our budget. So the largest portion is the city subsidy, which is that kind of the darker blue, well, medium blue, the darkest blue, which you'll see in FY 2019 and FY 20. Those were fares. And you can see 21, 22, we eliminated fares in 22, 21, obviously the height of COVID. You know, fares also went away during that time. Some of the other items that we have here, so the very light blue, that is other state funding, that was CARES and CRISA funding that we had. Then you also have charter revenue is that purple color. You'll see that was really big in FY 19 and 20, and that was the Blue Line shuttle that accounted for that. The other largest area of our funding, you'll see is that orange line. That is our commuter choice grant. That funds essentially operations on top of our base budget. And then the last item you see is that green, that was TRIP. So we had TRIP for 3 years. This year, we're still covered by TRIP through the end of calendar year 25. So we have to go fare free. But the funding for that decreased each year, with the idea being the final year of TRIP, we sustain ourselves. So you'll notice that the budget has increased each year. A couple things that I do want to point out that have happened that can explain some of the largest jumps in that. Between 19 and 20, there's a significant jump. FY 19, that's when we first got a CBA. We were not unionized before that. So that's the first big jump. And then between 22 and 23, and you can see kind of increased those years, that's the new Dash network. That's when we introduced that. And the subsidy obviously went up because we eliminated fares around the same time, and the trip funding tapered down.
Edward, can I just make sure, yeah, and maybe there's some questions. I was gonna say the thing that often I think a lot of people don't realize outside of this board and staff is that orange line. Because that's not seen in any of the budgets. And that's paying for our most heavily traveled route and our most frequent service. And that's a grant. And the loss of that would be over 2 years, I know it's 11 million.
Yeah, so over $5 million a year.
Over $5 million a year. So that's, it kind of happens the way it does because of the nature of the grant, but it's just one of the takeaways that we want to make sure you all as board members are equipped with and understand as we talk with people in the community and others and council members. Sorry, Jason.
My question is on the orange part, the commuter choice grant. It ends in FY 25, correct?
So FY
And we have to-
25 is when the current round ends, so we're on our third round of that grant. And so we are applying for a new round. I think it was last month that the board approved our.
And when
up
do
to
we
that.
know?
We'll be submitting the application, I think it's December. December is when it's due. I think we'll know in the late springs when we typically find out.
Okay.
Marchish, yeah.
Okay, cool.
There is a public, and I've talked with Joshua, there's a public engagement piece of that, which we did 2 years ago. Bob Gronenberg will remember sending a letter after some pressure from staff attached to do so. But it's really important people speak up about just the value of that service, because they see the numbers, but also then you can talk about the connections and how it really moves people within the community. And so, you know, expectation is that we're gonna be making sure that we are getting the word out to encourage people to weigh in on it, on the value of the project, city officials, who are on.
Okay, cool. I chime in on one other piece of this that I think is really important that we don't talk about. And I think, you know, on the city side, we've kind of been pushing to show this more because it's kind of the same thing as the community choice grant, it doesn't show up in the budget. But when you all approve the DRPT grants that we apply for every year, one of those is operating assistance, and that is money directly back to the city based on how much we are spending on operating, and I think there's a calculation for ridership in there too. So when we do have more ridership, we're getting more money back. That money is going into a different fund. It's our MPTC trust. It can be used on transit. We typically use it on WMATA as the city, but I think it's really important to try and show that that is taking away, like that, we could be using it on Dash, right? It's money we're getting back for Dash, and so I think it's an important part of the picture to show, because in theory, like, yes, we were choosing to spend, you know, the blue as the general dollars that we're spending on Dash. We could be spending the money that Dash is bringing back in, right? Like we spend it on WMATA art and have these conversations, but I think it is we're getting the money because of Dash, and I think it's important to figure out how we kind of represent that in our budget. City can choose to spend it however they want, but they're getting it back because of the money we're putting into Dash.
Can you remind us of what the amount might be in a given year that we would get
Last
back?
year, I think it was 9.4 million.
So this,
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, that's something we've talked about how to show that, because it is, while it doesn't directly fund Dash, Dash directly calculates what goes into that. It is a very important.
And all those riders are going to help to continue to recalculate the federal formulas. They come to the region. Because there's also that regional perspective where we're contributing to that overall urbanized area allocation, which is all getting taken by WMATA. Every penny.
So in the end, it's a wash for the city, right? It doesn't really matter. The money is funding transit, but it's the way we kind of portray where those funds come from that I think is important.
Just want to make sure that I'm understanding. So, I'm thinking, having a little bit of hard time fingers and color here. The green is not advertising, or is that advertising?
That's the
That's
So yeah, so
And so,
the dark green is.
yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
And so we're not actually seeing any meaningful, can you just explain what is the miscellaneous line?
So miscellaneous
I know it's
is,
a tiny piece.
is tiny,
Yeah.
it's surplus sales, insurance recoveries. Yeah, it's
Oh,
less than,
okay.
I think we budgeted at 60K.
Oh, okay. That's
Cool.
That's where all my focus is on.
Right there.
Yeah, Don Draper's crushing it.
Okay, thanks.
So you, it wasn't that you weren't being, it just wasn't able to be seen.
And on the, Hillary, so this federal, the dollars that are coming back to the federal point we use for WMATA, so is there a ceiling on that, or like if Dash top 6 million, we're gonna bring even more into the city? Is there sort of a limit on the size of the pot where it diminishes in terms of what we get, or is it infinite?
I don't know. I don't know how the calculations are done. We keep track, and we generally get between like 20 and 30%. So we'll submit what we think our operating costs are, and then DRPT gives us an amount back each year. And that amount varies each year based on probably a number of things. I'm not exactly sure how that
But
formula.
ridership is one of them.
Ridership is one.
So like we were getting a lot of money through the CARES Act during the COVID years, but we had very low ridership. We were getting probably less through this.
It's more about how much we're spending on our transit.
Oh, okay.
At a later date, we're all trying to wrap our heads around this. I think that could potentially be something that we could bring back to you as a specific presentation of all of the different sources of money that comes in for transit. I know we really want to do that. It makes your head spin a little bit, so just be warned.
moving on from funding sources, so getting into kind of the process of budget. Tonight we did, the board did approve, the supplementals that we will be submitting, so as far as this process, the cycle kind of goes. The budget process starts, we get the guidance on supplemental guidance from, the city manager's office. So Dash will then go through its budget process and bring those supplementals to be considered by the board, which happened tonight. Once the board considers those, we will submit that to the Office of Management and Budget and the city manager's office. Then that kind of starts back and forth where those are reviewed. Dash staff will attend a number of meetings with the city manager's office and OMB to discuss the supplementals, kind of funding and how it work. Then once all of those meetings have been had, supplementals will be proposed to council. And that's when council then review all of the supplementals for all the different city affiliate entities and city departments. And then once supplementals are considered, if they are awarded, they'll be added to Dash's budget. And then they will become part of our current services. So the next fiscal year, when we start that budget process, those supplementals that were funded in the prior fiscal year will be in our base current service budget. Moving forward. And then that cycle just starts again every fall. So typically, what we've prioritized in our supplementals, we have focused on the Alexandria Transit Vision Plan. As we just did tonight, we consider those submissions annually, and we always try to focus on continuing the implementation of the new Dash network. It should be mentioned that we are several years behind implementing the ATV just because of year over year underfunding, supplementals not going through that. So we are behind implementing the ATV. Some other supplementals we've considered in the past. Tonight, all of our supplementals were just tied to the ATV, knowing kind of the budget situation that the city finds itself in. But in the past, we have considered staffing increases, occasionally new technology. We've added local funding for grant applications. And then we had the wage increase, for example, that was one of the things that we considered tonight, the CBA mandated wage increase. But that's typically what goes into our supplemental process. Then as far as reductions, we also had the 1% reduction that was considered tonight based on the city manager's guidance. So each year, the city manager does release that guidance as a reduction target as a percentage of the prior fiscal year's approved budget. So the 1% tonight was off of FY25. Year we are currently in FY25's current services budget. So in the past, we've typically tried to do a blend of service reductions and administrative cuts. We this year just put forward service reductions because, as was mentioned, there's really not much administrative that we can cut. And the only thing that we had available to cut is really training, which goes against the priorities before. Reductions have typically been taken. The reductions that we put forward last year were a combination of administrative reductions and the cuts to line 104. We were successful in getting the 104 funded back through the council's add delete process, but the administrative reductions were taken. So just kind of giving a sense of what the year over year impact of those reductions are. It does have a compounding impact. So since FY20, if you just add each year's reductions on top of each other, over the past 5 fiscal years, we've got 1.4 million, a combination of administrative reductions and service cuts. It has been primarily administrative reductions. So just think of that. We have very little administratively we can cut, and we've over the past 5 years, you've cut 1.4 million. There's run out of administrative things to cut at a certain point. So what are the next steps? The board has approved current services. Tonight, they approved supplementals and reductions. And I kind of talked about how we'll be submitting those and working with OMB and the city manager's office to review those.
I have a question
Yes.
on the previous slide. So are those year by year reductions? Is this truly cumulative in the sense that, for example, what was added in the second bar wasn't then claimed back in the subsequent year's budget?
So anything that was claimed, well, for anything to be added back, it would have had to have been a supplemental, or the only other way that we have, and the next slide will kind of show how the board has managed its budget. Once we know the subsidy, the board can decide to, you know, by the spring, when we know what the subsidy is, we also have a better picture of how the current fiscal year is trending, and the board can consider current fiscal year actuals and kind of reprioritize things within the budget. So this isn't I mean, these are the reductions that have been taken, not necessarily offset by any supplementals that were.
Let me ask that a different way, which is, so it's about 1.4 million. So if you go back 1, 2, 3 slides. Where the funding sources, I'm assuming, show are matched to our spending.
Yes.
Does that mean that the final bar there would be 1.4 million higher had there not been all these reductions?
That is accurate.
Okay.
The column reductions, I mean, I hate the word efficiency because I feel like it implies inefficiency, and this isn't just Dash, this is the city as a whole. I think that we as a community don't get a lot of credit for how efficiently we do things, the reality of it. But I think the strategy has always been to try to find ways to reduce the burden on the budget. And so, yeah, to your point, that cumulative over time, we've managed to reduce 1.4 million in pressure, but the reality is the budget is continuously going up because of the wage increases and those other things. So many
Yeah,
of these things.
that's what I was trying to merge together. It's like the prior chart was showing that over 6 years. Basically, our budget is more than doubled.
Right.
And so,
It would have been that much higher.
okay,
Yeah, if we hadn't done this. Yeah.
Right, so what happens next? Right now, we're in that kind of highlighted area, current services, supplementals, and reductions. As one of the previous slides showed, all of that will go between OMB and the city manager's office, and kind of a back and forth between staff and those entities. Then in February, the city manager will make his budget presentation to council, where the budget, including any supplementals and reductions, will be presented. After that time, there'll be a number of departmental meetings related to that, and the add delete process will start after that. After all of which, we will have a final subsidy number. We'll know the number for, in this case, FY 26, and what we're getting funded, at what level we're getting funded at. At which time, we'll also have a better understanding of our current fiscal year actuals, trends, and a number of items will have come in that will help us have even a better picture into the true cost of the next fiscal year. We will then bring to the board a revised budget presentation based on all of those factors. And that will present that for the board's consideration. That happens in May, and then in June, the board will adopt that final budget after a public comment period. So that is the process every year, and then after June and after the recess is done for the board, we'll start the whole process all over. So I'll open up to any final questions. Otherwise, that was all operating budget. Raymond is going to talk about capital items. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just real quick on the budget presentation? I think it's important for the board is pretty consistent about saying how appreciative they are of the support of council and the community. And it's just important to always have an opportunity to say that in a public meeting. If you look at the city, if you look at the slide that shows the growth of the budget over time, and you go back to 19 when the city subsidy was somewhere in the tune of 12 to 13 million. If that was sort of tied to the rate revenue's been growing, not adjusted for tax rate increases, you're talking about the revenue subsidy going from 13 million to, I think, still below 20, if I did my math roughly right. versus where it's at now, where it's went from 12 to above 30 million, if I'm looking at the chart correctly. So that's another way. There's a lot of ways to slice and dice this data, but I think it's really important to note that the city has been investing in transit and showing its priority to transit at a rate of growth quite higher than what we've seen in our revenues growing as a city. And that's a really boring budget hat thing to say, but if you sit back and think about it, it's pretty notable just how much the city's been investing in transit and how much it prioritizes Dash.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I'm here to speak to and provide an update on our capital program as it relates to a strategy update in this meeting. This is a presentation that we were intending to bring to you at our last October meeting, but we ran outside of it. Our apologies. But a few things have changed since that meeting to where we are tonight. We've learned what our presidency is going to look like. We've learned what our house is going to look like, and we've learned what our Senate is going to look like. And fortunately, I think it's very frustrating to anticipate a little bit of a steeper challenge than where we were about a month ago. So back in April, we brought to the board, and the board has adopted 5 strategic plan goals. What we'll be talking about tonight is going to reflect and focus mostly primarily on these 2 goals here, goal number 3, which is environmental stewardship, as well as goal number 5, fiscal responsibility and efficiency. I'll just touch a little bit on the other goals as well, but these are the 2 main areas that this topic will primarily focus on. When we speak our capital program, the Dash Alexandria Transit Company asset portfolio consists of many things. It's not just our rolling stock, it's not just the buses, but it also encompasses our facilities, our infrastructure, our technologies, and everything in between. These technologies these capital needs and these assets, they all live within the city's capital improvement program in various places. We build all of our needs, and we plan on funding to maintain, grow, and expand all of the capital needs in various places on our capital improvement program, the CIP. When you add all of our capital and asset needs and what they represent in our CIP is built over a 10-year period, all of our capital needs represent over a $200 million investment that is required for us to maintain steady good repair and for capital and our technologies to be where they need to be at any given point in time. Our capital priorities are driven mainly by 3 priorities and initiatives. Our first and foremost, the most important thing is for us to maintain steady good repair. That can range from anywhere from ensuring the most prominent one is ensuring our rolling stock is replaced and maintain a good working order. We use a industry standard benchmark of 12 years of useful life for our heavy duty buses. It starts from that and it goes to various useful lifespans for our technologies, our software, our systems, and our facilities, as well as our infrastructure. We prioritize supporting the Alexandria Transit Strategic Plan. This is the ATSP that the board adopts and is the backbone of why Dash is so successful at doing what it does. We move people, we provide mobility, we provide value as a public service infrastructure to our community. And this is more specific to our rolling stock back in 2017 or 18. Both the board and city leadership has adopted the goal for the Dash fleet to convert 100% to 100% zero emissions fleet by the year 2037. That has 2 milestone dates to it. The first milestone is for us to purchase only zero emissions buses by the year 2027. And if that's met and maintained, that means that our fleet should be 100% converted to 100% zero emissions by the year 2037. So what we're going to speak to, what I'm going to dive into a little bit tonight, we've had a lot of great successes with our programs and our goals and our initiatives, and we'll dive a little bit into that. But we're going to provide an outlook on our funding outlook, our successes, and our needs. There will be a gap, and that gap, for the most part, sees an unmet future. So that's going to put 2 of these priorities in direct conflict with each other. at the very least two of these. So the first and foremost, maintaining steady good repair. And second, our overall zero emissions goal. We are at risk of not meeting our goal to purchase zero emissions buses only by the year 2027. And of course, if that's not met, that by default will push and slide on the goal for us to transition our fleet to 100% zero emission by the year 2027. So diving into our immediate out years, so we're currently planning and building our capital program and planning for the year fiscal year FY26. Before I dive into this, we're currently in FY25. FY25 is a bit of a quiet year for us because we don't have much to do as far as replacement buses. We've been very successful as far as our capital program from 2019 or so up until now. All of our 2022, 23, and 24 needs have been met and exceeded as far as rolling stock, as far as infrastructure, and what that related. So up until now, we've been in very, very good shape. We've been doing very, very well. We have currently the largest deployment of zero emissions buses, one of the largest in this region and the largest in the Commonwealth. So diving into FY26, it's the next immediate year where we're going to have activity. For our bus replacement, we have 7 buses too. That represents a $11.5 million need. Replace all 7 of them as battery electric or zero emissions. Of that, we have 6.3 funded. What that means is that we are still able to maintain steady repair. We can replace all 7 buses with 7 buses. It doesn't mean that we're going to be able to replace them with all battery electric. So at this rate, we have next success. We can replace 2 of them with battery electric. The remaining 5 would have to be clean diesel. But the good news here is that we are still meeting steady repair. One of the background needs that's starting to very rapidly rise in the background is our facility type rehabilitation. We moved into the current DASH facility way back in 2008, 2009. The building's approaching 15 years old. It's approaching midlife lifespan of many of the components and structural systems of the building. If for those who are familiar with our building, our deck is deteriorating and is aging at a much worse rate than anticipated. And based on the city Department of General Services and our facilities people, they've done a very, very good job helping to stay on top of how things are aging, how things are changing in conditions, of what are the rising needs that are coming out of that. What we're learning is that the deck is rapidly approaching the point where we need to rehabilitate it, replace it, or somehow get it back up and refresh its useful life. That has almost very rapidly turned into a $12 million need. The city has identified this and recognized this 1 or 2 years ago. They have placed $3 million or so into the DASH CMFP funding and the CIP to help address this issue. But what we've learned quickly since is that $3 million is far from enough to address this issue. So far, the true need to fully address and rehabilitate the deck is going to be closer to a $12 million investment.
Ray, I've got a question on the bus replacement. So you're saying 11.5 million for 7 buses?
Yep.
That seems really high. I didn't know they crossed this $1 million threshold.
We're shooting for the moon.
Okay.
And so this $11.5 million represents replacing all of them as battery electric.
Okay, so and there's no more Volkswagen funding or anything like that available?
Now, I'll speak to that a little bit. We have tried to pursue alternate funding such as EPA funding, clean heavy duty vehicle funding to help augment and fill in this gap so we can replace all 7 as battery electric. That argument has not been successful.
So what is a bus running a clean diesel and a
diesel-
battery? Yeah.
A clean diesel nowadays is running in the neighborhood of $700,000.
Really? Wow. Okay.
And a 40-foot and a 40-foot electric bus is in a neighborhood of 1.2, 1.3 million.
That sounds right. Yeah, that's up by the hydrogen costs, actually.
At first, we got electrics for just under $1 million, right? I mean,
Yeah,
our
yeah,
very
our
first
first-
electrics we got for.
Our first electrics, 2019 money, were 920, 950.
Yeah, I remember that.
But a lot of things happen. Inflation, manufacturers have dropped out, supply has gone down, demand has gone up. So the circumstances have not been ideal.
Well, the tariffs will
Before you come off this slide, Ray, I just want to point out this deck rehabilitation issue should not be something that we're having to deal with on this facility ever. And Ray did a good job of talking around it in a professional way. I will say the building was done wrong. And the deck was done wrong, and it is failing. And that is a huge amount of money to fix that problem. And so that, we're just telling you all this, again, Ray's goal here is to help you understand the various pressures. That's an additional pressure, right, on the budget that we shouldn't be having to expend. But we can't sit back and let the building decay. And so the balancing act is going on there. I don't want to get ahead of Ray in his presentation to talk about the grants that we're going after, but nonetheless, it is an added pressure. So go ahead.
On the, sorry, just real quick, on the bus replacement front, is there an opportunity to, like lease buses or any alternatives to buying what's?
We have looked into leasing or OpEx model for capital before. Nothing has really stuck to the wall, primarily because the way we get a lot of our capital funding tend to be geared towards CapEx, meaning funded in front, front and upfront. It's just the way that we get capital funding just makes it very difficult for us to spread that cost over time.
So that is the same answer I got when I brought this up to Josh when we first met 7.5 years ago. So I think it honestly belies a lack of really addressing the economics, because it's more about the process. And so I think the question underlying that question is about the fundamentals of the economics, like just the dollars. Forget how it's budgeted for, but like, do the dollars make sense? And then I think the right question to ask is like, well, then what has to be true about how it's budgeted? To make that work.
Yeah. We
That was a
are,
lot more. I was gonna ask, what does it cost that you asked over eloquently than I?
and I don't want to consume too much time, but I'll provide we actually have a pretty good example on the technology side, right?
Yeah.
Our CAD AVO system is quickly approaching end of life. So when we first brought on our current CAD AVO system, it used to be a very front-ended, cost model, CapEx. Back then it was $5-6 million upfront to put in a comprehensive CAD AVO suite, right? You pay a lot upfront, you pay very little to keep the lights on year after year. Nowadays, when we go into replacement, we're seeing that model shift, where it's shifting to an OpEx model where today, for us to get in the new CAD AVO system, it's only going to be in the tune of $2, maybe $3 million. Much lower cost up front, but it's going to be a higher cost for us to keep the lights on year after year. So, but it is a valid point of concept for us to keep our eyes on the rolling stones.
Praveen, I would also say, in part, to your point, the question of the source of the money and sort of how it's funded and that kind of stuff. I mean, we do now have Art on our board, who's the CFP guy, who might be able to help us better think about creative ways to do that. But in my sort of understanding, and got a lot of budget people in the room, is that leasing is an operating expense, and that we've seen the pain that goes around our operating budget. So it's not to be dismissive of the idea, rather to say like, how would we navigate that? Not trying to open a can of worms for discussion, but to where we would advance our BEV adoption by leasing large aspects of those vehicles, as opposed to having those hit as one-time expenditures as CIP money. Where would that, money come from? We also have been very cautious about some of the models that were put forth. I think the manufacturer that was big on that, on the electric bus side, has gone bankrupt, which is Proterra, and they walked away from all of that. So all the people who were in those agreements also, so there was a risk factor too, where they now lost their support and that kind of stuff, but I'm not trying to dodge your question, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
No,
I definitely understand that. And I think really the question that I'm trying to get at is like, if we look at accelerating the transition, one of the things that has to be looked at is like the all-in sort of fuel cost comparison. Right, and I know that there's the facilities aspect of it. And so that's something that I think would be interesting in looking at, it's like, what's the level of acceleration of the BEV transition that would yield a fuel cost savings? Because, and the reason I'm saying an acceleration is because you have that infrastructure cost for your facilities, makes a little more sense if you're sharing that across a larger volume of kilowatt hours delivered into those bus batteries, right? So I think that's one question that, you know, it's probably more detailed than to be addressed here. The other more basic question is that, right, you talked a little bit about the relative cost of the buses. I was just trying to like back out from the numbers you had here. And it looks like it's about 1.6 million per BEV and 600K per diesel bus. Does that align with the sort of the latest quotes?
Yeah, roughly, yes. There's a number of articulated buses folded in as part of that assumptions for us to be able to plan for growth and expansion. The cost of a diesel bus is somewhat fluid as well. You know, they can vary between mid-600s to mid-700s. So we try to plan on it. We try to find a good middle ground.
Okay, but you're seeing on the order of $1 million per unit premium per battery.
Yep.
Bus.
Yep.
Versus the, okay.
So this is the forecast for FY 26. We're in okay shape as far as buses, and we have quite a bit of a need for deck rehabilitation. There's a strategy though to address the efficiency and the unmet need for deck rehabilitation. Next, I'm going to go into FY 27, and unfortunately, at least on the bus side, the picture does not get better. And FY 27 is a big year for us. And sorry.
I'm sorry, I think I missed it. What is that strategy on? Or are you gonna talk about that?
Yeah,
Okay, got it. Sorry.
FY 27, most of our needs in FY 27 is on the bus side. FY 27 is a big year for us, from many different aspects. One, that we have a lot of buses due for replacement, 14 buses. We don't typically see 14 buses due for replacement, but FY 27 is one of those years. The amount of funding that is available for us in FY 27 is severely underfunded. FY 27 is also the first year in our zero emissions goal that we should be purchasing nothing but zero emissions buses. As a result of all those put together, we are only able to replace 7 of the 14 buses needed in FY 27. And with that, none of them is battery life. $17.1 million unfunded. And to add a caveat to that, FY 27 is the first year where the bipartisan infrastructure law is expired. So we need to take that into consideration. But it will be a very challenging year for us.
What's the direct implication of that on this?
One of the programs have been very successful is Lono. Lono and bus facilities are both funded at a very unprecedented level. That was a funding mandate that was put into effect with the bipartisan infrastructure law. It's the reason why we're successful in getting funding for the infrastructure, for the facility, and for a good chunk of our replacement buses is due to the bipartisan infrastructure law. That bill expires in FY 26. It's the last year of funding available for that. And what we typically see is that the successor to that, especially with the incoming administration, we don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know what the priorities are going to be, and we don't know what the funding levels are going to be. So,
and are you projecting based on this that diesel bus costs are going up to close to 900,000 per unit in FY 27?
Yeah, this accounts for inflation as well.
Okay. So that's like, I don't want to make this a math class, but you're talking about like
A lot. Say a lot.
20 on the order of 25% inflation between now and
It funds like 7.7 buses to be right now. We account for inflation, we account for not just inflation by itself, but also the change in market where supply chains going down, we have the gas going up, so all this kind of compounding together.
We always squeeze as much as we can. If we ended up there, I mean, Ray often haggles them down. You should see him. And he comes to my office, Josh, we can get an extra bus out of this, or we've been able to switch it from a 40-foot to an articulated bus, and so we definitely do those things. I think he's probably being overly conservative in his numbers, but I think the idea is just that we have a huge gap that we're trying to figure out how we.
Art had his hand up.
Oh, yeah, Art's been waiting, sorry.
No worries. Ray, could we just talk for a second, for both the 26 and the 27 needs? Is funding the kind of unfunded versus funded the only limiter that needs to be discussed when it comes to diesel versus electric? And I'm just thinking that's probably bigger than the discussion tonight, but I'm thinking all the way from, procuring that meant, procuring 14 electric buses, the infrastructure backing it.
Yeah,
Or
so,
our consistency, our policy for reliability. So is that part of it too, or is it just money at this point?
at this point, the biggest limiting factor is going to be funding for rolling stock. We are in very good shape as far as funding for infrastructure, funding for chargers, funding for electrical service. As far as supporting infrastructure and facilities, we're in really good shape thanks to LONO and the bipartisan infrastructure law. The biggest thing holding us back is going to be funding for the rolling stock. And that is because primarily it's not a one-time need. It's not a one-time need, that's a recurring need. And that's a recurring need. That's the cost and the value of which is rising year after year. Coupled with our natural steady repair needs. 27 is a big year, we have 14 buses due. It's not every single year where we're going to have 14 buses due, but that is one of the years. But to your question, it is funding for rolling stock.
Is 27 also your next CBA?
What's the approximately, like, what's the savings and operating costs on electric versus diesel? What do you think about it?
Not at the top of my head, there is savings, of course, with fuel and energy costs. There's a couple of factors that we're not quite at a final answer for that yet. Primarily because we're still in the process of getting good at running our electric buses and being able to squeeze every single energy cost savings out of it. That's an ongoing process with operations, with maintenance and just technology overall. And that's one of the challenges with zero emissions adoption. A lot of the organization has to relearn how to use, deploy, and manage, and best utilize the fleet of battery electric buses and zero emissions. It's very different from conventional diesel. That's a process that's going to take many years before we get to the point of we're squeezing more than or very close to 100% of what we can out of energy cost savings.
Well, what have we learned from systems that are ahead of us on this? That's applicable here.
As far as savings or
Generally, to help this go faster and go well. In Alexandria, what lessons have you taken from peers who are farther ahead?
what we've learned, so this is a topic.
Besides buses are expensive, we got that.
Yeah. What we've learned is that people are learning along with us as well. People are learning from us, people are learning from others. A big topic that comes up with us is exactly that, is being able to capitalize on energy costs, on the savings and energy costs. We have a grant funding program to implement charge management. That's going to do exactly that. Right now, we're not exactly running the battery electric buses in the most optimal sense. We run them in a sense where we prioritize service first, and then second, optimizing energy dispensing, energy usage. But part of our focus in the next couple of years with technology like surcharge management is for us to maximize optimizing energy usage, right? Are we charging at the right times? Are we making the most out of the vehicles? Are we doing peak shaving? We're not currently today, but it's the opportunity to do that and to really capitalize and squeeze out every single dollar we can. We could. We're not there yet, but we have, we're getting the tools lined up and experiences lined up for us to slowly and progressively get to that point.
Is it possible to cannibalize some of the buses due for retirement to extend you know, half of the 14's life cycle another year or two?
Yes, I mean, realistically, the vast majority of these 14 buses can extend life past their 12 years. What's gonna happen is that reliability will go down, and operating costs will go up. But can they survive past that 2027? Absolutely, more than that. And when it gets to the point where buses, we call retire themselves,
Yeah.
you know, we end up gunning one to keep others intact and keep the
Okay.
remainders of the fleet running.
Small hybrids, Raymond, that are to be replaced.
FY 27 is our hybrids.
And do those have, as opposed to clean diesel, I guess, maybe we've started to replace our first set of hybrids or are about to. I'm just wondering if they have had a different life expectancy than, say, some of the diesels that we were able, because I certainly remember 14-year-old buses that I've seen
Yeah.
running a dash periodically when we've had issues with meeting our CIP.
The biggest wild card when it comes to hybrids and how long they'll survive and last is not the batteries, but it's a component called the D-pin. Is one of the components that either when they fail, and they kind of fail, they have a tendency to fail randomly, requires an extensive replacement. That's a strategic investment and decision we make, you know, when a hybrid has a D-pin fail at year 11 or year 12, is it worth the cost to spend and invest $50,000 to replace a D-pin to keep that bus alive for how long?
Is that what we've talked about? There are several hybrids that are out, which was creating some of the service issues along with the mechanics who are unavailable. Is that the part that was waylaid some of our hybrids? Am I remembering?
That is some of them.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm gonna move on to, this is a bit of an overview of, if properly or adequately funded, what our fleet transition would look like. I don't expect for the board to be able to read every single line here, but just take note of the shape and the colors. The peach salmon color bar up the top represents what portion of our fleet are hybrids. The blue represents what portion of our fleet are clean diesels, and the green represents what portion of our fleet are zero emissions. Starting from the top represents where we are currently at FY 2023. This is year-old data, and progressing all the way down to FY 27, where you see eventually clean diesels extinguished from our fleet and our fleet transitions to entirely zero emissions. This represents an important road if everything is fully funded adequately. And again, as mentioned, the biggest thing that's holding us back from our fleet composition looking like this as we head on into FY 27, FY 37 is going to be rolling stock funding. And again, facilities are in fantastic shape. We have many $1 million worth of infrastructure investments and projects lined up, ready to roll. We have 6 megawatts worth of power and charging infrastructure that will be built into our facility expansion. So we have plenty of charging ability. It's just, can we get the rolling stock there to convert our fleet? We adopted a goal to go to zero emissions back in 2018, possibly 2017, and since then, we have gone after many different funding and grant opportunities to help us fund that transition and for us to meet and maintain that goal. Of the 8 funding opportunities we went after, we've had a 75% success rate. We went after 8, we got 6, all discretionary funding. That has resulted in us having 14 zero emissions buses in our fleet. That has resulted in us having the largest deployment in Virginia. That has resulted in us having being neck and neck with the largest deployments in DC. And that has resulted in us being able to build a new facility that will be a dedicated electric bus charging yard. And again, and again, we forecast that we've had a lot of successes in the past. We cannot rely on success in the future. There's no guarantee that we'll be as successful with Mono, bus and bus facilities, and whatever is going to replace the parts of the infrastructure law come 2026. But as far as our current strategies for our immediate needs, one of the biggest needs is our debt replacement. We have to somehow turn $3 million into $9, $10, $12 million. We're going to take that project and apply for state of grid repair and or major expansion funding that's going to help us amplify and grow that money into somewhere a lot more in line with what that project calls for. we are we're likely going to strategize and put forth either components of that project and possibly take, if we're successful, take state funding, local funding, leverage that against federal funding, pursue federal funding to augment facility rehabilitation needs. We have the buses that are due in FY 26. For Lono, there's an opportunity for us to pursue from Lono to bridge that gap for FY 26. And depending, with the outcome of the presidential election and House and Senate, we may need to consider, we may also, it might be worthwhile for us to consider are there any ways that we can take our FY 27 needs and take advantage of the existing bill while it's still out there and the funding levels for us still exist. We were not successful in pursuing EPA clean heavy duty vehicle funding. We pursued that to try to convert our FY 26 buses to 7 battery electrics. We were not successful in that, mainly due to classification. But they've told us hang tight. There's going to be a Dura fund that's going to come out sometime in FY 26, so we're keeping an eye and ear close to the ground for that. So these are some of the strategies that we are actively planning for and anticipating for us to try to close these gaps, at least in the immediate, for the immediate needs in FY 26, FY 27.
Just one question. Commuter Choice had that capital option, which what I understood was less subscribed than the pool we're competing for operating money for the 35, 36 we talked about earlier. So we got with 2 buses that are the articulated out of that last round. So, I mean, since we operate 2 routes and that we use more than just those 2 buses, is there an opportunity to apply for that funding again? Or is it because it would be the same project that they would not accept that in a future round? So I didn't see that on your future list.
Martin, help me, remind me, the set aside for capital has changed a little bit for MTC, and that's kind of,
Yeah, I can just, so previously the program was undersubscribed from the capital side, and there's a ratio they had to keep between capital and operations. That has since changed. There were a couple of large, I think, there's a metro station entrance, like a big dairy parking ride lot projects, things like that. So they've gotten a lot of capital projects.
So they're not shopping around for
cycles. So now that is no longer a situation where they're actively, searching for capital projects. So we're not planning to apply this year for that.
Any other questions? And what is Dura stand for?
Diesel emissions reduction. Something like that. I don't recall.
And is that administered through DOT?
No, this is a EPA administered grant. That's geared towards replacing or upgrading diesel vehicles.
Okay. Is that, do they solicit every year, or is that where they only do that periodically?
It's periodic. Last time that program has come out was FY 22, FY 23. It seems like it took a break for FY 24, and they kind of hinted at it's going to come back out in 25, 26. There's a state level program, but I think it's for states to apply, and it's up to states DEQ office to determine how to distribute that to localities within the state. So we're going to come into that as well to see where that money's going from.
Thank you.
Also, in addition to that, we're also scoping out the tech program, which is also funded as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law. May or may not be an opportunity there to help us build and improve resiliency, but we're working with our strategists to help us figure out, is that something that is worthwhile for us to pursue, and if we have something that can stick to the wall.
I'm curious with the new Transdev strategic advisory scope, have we asked them what they think might accelerate our progress on this one?
We have not engaged with the I think you're referring to the zero emissions consultant on the Transdev contract. Is that what you're referring to?
Just generally, I mean, you contracted strategic advisory, this seems like an area where we have goals at risk.
Right.
So it's a place where I would seek strategic advice.
Yeah, absolutely. We haven't engaged with them quite yet. We do have a strategist group that we work through in conjunction with the city.
Okay.
And they've been very helpful with us. So it's, we could probably engage with the Transdev resource as well.
We definitely will do that. I mean, that contract just got set up, so. But, the thing I would say to your question about what can we learn from others, I think one of the things that's been interesting for me to hear is a lot of people are asking me, asking us, because they're seeing us as actually further along than they are. So many systems have taken the perspective of we're gonna try 4 or 5, and that's all we're planning for. We're just testing it out. But visiting other systems that are much more in, what I often find is that they are leveraging a lot more formula funds too, which is something we don't have access to. So
what does that mean?
So there are federal formula funds for capital that regions receive, and in our region, that goes to us as a whole through NVTC and NVTA. And pretty much is all used for WMATA purposes. In a jurisdiction, an example would be Palm Desert. There's a system out there called Sunline that has a huge implementation. They're the only ones, they get all the money. And the more money that comes in on federal level, they can choose to spend that money on electrification. The grants we're talking about are being discretionary, are just one-time shot kind of things. Whereas all that capital funding that's coming in this region is getting divvied up and consumed by all of the various systems. So, but that's not to say we're not continuing to ask for strategies.
Right, just a question, just trying to clarify it for myself here. When we go back to your slide 7 about fiscal 27 needs, yeah, I think we've been focused on whether or not we're going to be meeting the board's electrification goals. But if I'm reading this correctly, aside from not being able to purchase any battery electric buses in 27, we'd only be meeting about 50% of state of good repair. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Just because we kind of got focused on electric, but I wanted to make sure we're pointing out that actually in the current situation, we're not even if we just did all diesel, there's a concern there. But which kind of leads to my second question. Some of the opportunities we're looking at, that's on your slide 9, is all of that exclusively electric? Or are there opportunities, if we have to go that route, are there opportunities to use those grants for, kind of in-kind diesel replacements to meet state of good repair?
I think our primary opportunity to help us support and fund diesel is going to be the state's merit program, which the city already utilizes. On the federal side, a lot of the funding, especially the discretionary funding opportunities, are geared towards a lot of the current administration's priorities, which is low emissions, and EV technologies. So on the federal side, we do see most of the funding programs discretionary, geared towards converting and upgrading the fleet, and not as many that are geared towards just maintaining state of good repair. One caveat to that is bus facilities.
And that's really targeting very old, very decrepit fleets. They tend to spend that money on fleets that are well past their useful life, not ones that are just now due.
Well, thank you so much, Rick.
We're gonna keep working on it, folks. We're still committed. It's just a lot of challenges.
Well, and I know, as the election results are very fresh, but Josh, you're so active in the state association. I'm sure this is going to be a topic of discussion, engaging our congressional delegation, which I know you guys have been doing continuously, but certainly, especially as the bipartisan infrastructure law is set to expire, about kind of path forward because all the systems are going to be in the same boat that we are.
Yes, and we didn't talk about the Virginia budget. Virginia is also running out of funds for capital for transit in their various allocations. So we're working hard on that. Also, we're going to really be focused, from this perspective of lobbying, it's really going to be a focus on getting the state to re-up their commitment in their funding, both capital
And that's in the next legislative, is that a budget year, the next legislative session?
Not this year.
Not, okay. But time to educate. Well, I think, for our next meeting is actually December 11th at 5:30
Oh.
p.m. So,
Thank you.
But
None of us caught that.
holiday
Oh, well.
meal provided though.
December 11th.
and
It
emphasis
is the
to make sure-
11th.
Please do show up in person so you can get your holiday meal and it's always a fun meeting, some fellowship before we go our separate ways to enjoy whatever, however you spend holiday season. Is there any other business to come before the board tonight? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
By Reese,
Second.
second Matt, all in favor? Aye. Thank you. Good night.